Come on. Don't be a nightmare. Hi. Come here. Hi there, thanks for joining me today. If you're new here, my name's Molly. I'm a knitter based out of the San Francisco Bay Area, where I live with my cat Lola, who you can see right here, and my boyfriend. On this channel, Lefty Knits, I like to talk about all things knitting, so if that's the kind of thing that you're into, I hope you'll stick around. I'm in a new filming location today. Those of you who've been around a while might notice that chair back there is the chair I usually sit in, so you've now seen most of my bedroom. I did, in the interest of full disclosure, film this whole video yesterday and the lighting from this spot, and the lighting was extremely weird. It was like kind of pink, but also like blowing out. I don't know. So I'm doing this again, and I'm hoping it goes better this time, but if the video quality is weird for any reason, I'm probably just gonna roll with it, so I'm sorry. Anyway, Happy New Year. I know that it's getting a little bit late to be wishing you that, but Lola's grooming her luxurious fur. I know it's a little bit late in the year to be wishing people a Happy New Year, I guess. I don't know when the cutoff is, but this is my first video of 2024. I recently returned from Alabama, where I was celebrating the holidays with my boyfriend's family. It was a really nice, relaxing time, and it was great to see everyone, and we've just been getting back into the swing of things and settling back into our normal routines for the past few days. So today I want to talk about what I made in 2023. So my main focus will be on the things I made for myself. I did knit some gifts, and I'll give you a rundown of kind of the numbers of those, but I'm not good at documenting my gift knits, and obviously then I give them to somebody else. So my gift knits have really not been something that I've been good at taking pictures of, especially in their final form. Maybe some of it is that I end up procrastinating a lot on actually knitting the things, and then by the time I'm finishing them, I kind of need to like hurry up and get them out the door. But either way, I think that's something that I definitely need to work on in 2024, and that way I'd be able to, you know, talk to you for this year at the end of the year when I'm giving you an overview of what I've knit. I have a better idea, and maybe I can talk about some of the things and show you some pictures. Just to run through some numbers, for me, I knit 8 neckwear pieces. That was 4 shawls and 4 cowls. I knit 8 garments for myself, and those were 4 pullovers, 1 cardigan, 1 slipover, and 2 summer tees. And then I also knit 1 hat for myself. So total, that is 17 items for me this year. In terms of gift knitting, I knit 5 baby or child sweaters. I think 2 of those were cardigans and 3 were pullovers. I knit 1 pair of adult socks for my boyfriend's mother, and I knit my boyfriend 1 hat, which I'm calling finished here, but I still have to block again. It was a muscle burrow. I talked about it a little bit recently. Essentially, I tried to knit it in half twisted rib, half stockinette, but the dimensions of each side were really not matching up, so it looked kind of weird on, and I frogged the stockinette half and knit it all in twisted rib, which I finished as of a few days ago, probably January 2nd or 3rd, but I do still need to block that. But I'm calling it done. I did knit and block and sew in the ends of a whole hat, so good enough for me. Overall, that's 8 gifts, so 25 items total in 2023, which feels like a pretty good number. You know, that's 2 finished items a month, 2 and a 12th items, I guess. And I did have some hiatuses in there, especially in terms of knitting for myself, and even I think gift knitting, although some of those I didn't document as well, and obviously I'm really only gonna go through the things I knit for myself. I think it was maybe sometimes during the periods where I had a lot of gift knits that I had committed myself to. Not necessarily that I promised people items, but more that I had promised myself that I would make these things. So I tend to just move a lot slower on gift knits. It's less fun if it's not for you. Not that I don't appreciate and enjoy gift knits sometimes, but when you're excited to try on and own the finished object, it's a little bit different. I also was finishing a whole PhD this year. So I think I can give myself a little bit of grace, although I'm gonna lightly say that I am hoping to finish maybe 30 items this year. The one thing that kind of surprised me is that I didn't knit any socks, except for that one pair of gift socks from my boyfriend's mom. I did have a big sock knitting like frenzy at the end of 2022, which I think in some ways sort of felt like it bled into 2023, but I guess it didn't. I test knit the Dawn socks for Bloom and Create, and I think after that I knit a bunch of variations of that and kind of found myself really interested in working up a bunch of shorty socks in particular. I guess maybe I burned out a little bit on socks, and instead I focused on neckwear a lot this year, which is new for me. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about my items, so why don't we go ahead and get started on that. Now, my plan is to talk to you about my items based on when I cast them on. Some of them took a really long time, and they weren't necessarily my first finished objects. Like, I didn't finish them in this order, but I did start them in this order. So I'll start with my first project. Gotta put down my coffee first. This is my current mood shawl by Leslie Ann Robinson. I knit this in Malabrigo Machita, which is a single ply superwash merino yarn. And I used the colors Three Little Pigs, Aurora, and Swamp from lightest to darkest. I used about between 300 and 350 yards of yarn for each of the colors, and I did omit the like end portion of the pattern. I'm showing you the back. So the way the pattern is written, you are doing these alternating sections of brioche and these like garter and eyelet ripples, and you're alternating which two colors you're using throughout. And then at one end, I don't know which end is the one I knit last, but whichever end that is, you're supposed to do big blocks of like these kind of ripples with each of your colors, and I just decided to omit that. So I definitely saved some yardage there. Not that I was really trying to. I started knitting this in December of 2022, and this was my main project for Huntsville last year for Christmas. So I took this to Alabama with me. I don't think I cast it on there, but I don't quite remember. I was also working on quite a few pairs of socks, but this was kind of my like more complicated project that I had for more like downtime. I finished it shortly after I got back in terms of the knitting. I finished knitting this on January 15th, but I didn't block it until April. One thing that I have felt as I've been knitting shawls this year, starting with this one, is that the blocking of them is a little bit stressful for me. I live in a like 600-ish square foot apartment with my boyfriend and my cat, and we just don't have that much space for me to like lay out a large project waiting for it to dry. So what I did is I ultimately decided to fold it in half to block it, which I've kind of mentioned before, and I pinned the sides out separately, like these ends that are kind of pointy. I pinned them separately, and it actually worked really great. I've done that more since. I really love this one. It's super cozy and warm. I might put it on. I'm like really cold right now. I actually did bring this to Alabama with me, and it was kind of nice to bring something the next year that I had been working on the year prior and have it to wear. It's like a very nice, warm, cushy layer, and I could totally see myself knitting more knit graffiti patterns. Most of the ones I've seen are multicolor, sort of intricate brioche patterns, and I find that sort of thing to be a lot of fun, as well as helpful in terms of getting me up to speed on like fixing brioche mistakes. I think this project was really great for that, because when you have the two colors, when you're like trying to figure out how to fix your mistakes, you know like which colors need to kind of go where, as opposed to when you're doing single color and you're trying to figure out which loop to pick up, and you're like, it could be any of these like 4 loops if you've like dropped a stitch, for example. This was a great investment of my time, and although I don't have any immediate plans to make any more knit graffiti patterns, I could totally see myself going for one in the future with some of my merino singles that I have that I'm wary about using for something like a sweater. Next up was my textbook cowl by Casey Herlihy. This was the first item that I completed of my Make 9, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the end. Casey is a designer I've made a lot of patterns of, and this was just a simple lace cowl, which I made in Cape Cod Yarn Company Merino Aran yarn. I don't have the band. It's like a kind of niche yarn that is the in-house dyed yarn from Adventures in Knitting, which is a Cape Cod yarn store, I believe, in Harwich. And I got that in October of 2021 when I was on the Cape for my cousin's wedding. The colorway was this like reddish, pinkish tonal. And I think it worked really well for the textbook. It was a nice way to use a kind of special skein of yarn that I had picked up, and I was able to knit it all during the month of January. I don't have the dates, but it went very quickly and was a really fun pattern. So I definitely recommend Casey's patterns. They'll be coming up more later. I think I knit 4 patterns from Casey this year. And if you're like mid-Cape on Cape Cod, I would recommend going to Adventures in Knitting. It was a fun little store. The third project I started was my Botanic Shawl by Stephen West. And this is my first go at like a triangular shawl. What I kind of, like when I picture a shawl, I picture something kind of triangular and big like this, even though there's lots of different shawls, obviously. So I made this in Knit Picks Stroll Gradient, which is a sock yarn, and that is this like contrast color. The color I used was Prickly Pear, and that is a discontinued yarn, although they do have Stroll in non-gradient forms available. And then my main color was Valley Yarn Charlemont in this like bare natural color, and that is a merino nylon silk blend. This is a very easy pattern. It has kind of a long stitch repeat. I think that there's like, I don't know, over 10 stitches in between each of these slip stitch details, and you're increasing along one of the edges, along this edge, I believe, as you go. And even though the repeats are pretty long, it's pretty easy to learn how to read your stitches so that you don't have to carry the pattern around, and you can just kind of like count the number of stitches between your slipped stitches so that you know how far along in the pattern you are. And I think that this is written to be a lot bigger than this. Maybe like 700-ish yards of each of the yarns used or so. I used 385 yards of the Stroll and 437 yards of the Charlemont. I believe I used the entire skein though, just one skein. And this is so pretty and so fun. I've actually started to knit another one, which I may or may not end up gifting. I think my one problem with this is that I don't really know how to wear it. I guess I'm kind of new to shawls in general, but like, it feels very long when I do something like this. I haven't figured out like which side I want down, or I don't know. So I haven't actually worn this as much as I would like. If you have any shawl styling tips, please comment them down below, because I'm still not great at that. And this is one that I find the triangular ones, especially this one big triangular one that I have, a little bit harder to style, because I can wear the other ones a little bit more like just a scarf. So I would say this was a win knitting wise. I did cast on another Botanic Shawl this year, although I didn't finish it. It was going to be a travel project. It ended up having to have a lot of frogging done, and when my next trip came about, my most recent one to Alabama, it just wasn't something that was a priority for me to knit. So hopefully that'll also be finished in 2023, and that will either end up being a gift or I'll be learning how to wear shawls better so that it's something I can add to my wardrobe rotation a little bit better. And this I knit from January 21st to April 20th. I believe this, much like my current mood, was something that I was intimidated by blocking, so it kind of languished for a while before I got around to that. Next up is my Ranunculus. So this is my first cast on garment of 2023. I believe it was also my first finished garment, and I really flew through this one. I knit this from January 29th to February 13th. So this was like a 2-week sweater. I knit this in Woolyknit British Wool 4-ply in the color Pine Forest Green, held double, with an additional strand of mohair. And that yarn was Lana Grossa, Silk Hair, and Petrol. And I used 1,331 yards of the woolly knit and 744 yards of the Silk Hair. Now, I did do quite a few mods of this. My gauge was different. There's supposed to be some short rows at the front collar, which I omitted, so the pattern just starts here. I tapered the sleeves, which I don't believe was part of it. So I had quite a few things that I did to mod. I'll link my project page on Ravelry if you're interested in what I did. So mine is a much more tight-fitting garment than the modeled pattern samples are. I can totally see why people knit a bunch of different versions of this. I don't think I would ever knit a version that was so different, you know, that I was working with like a fingering weight yarn held single, because that really sheer, super oversized look isn't really something that I'm going for most of the time with my own knitting. But, you know, I could imagine making some cotton versions, some short sleeve versions. I really enjoyed this. I think it turned out really well. It's very warm. It's definitely a little more rustic, and I tend to wear long sleeve shirts underneath it, often this black one, because I have found that this yarn bled a lot when I washed it, which did concern me a bit. But overall, I totally love this sweater. I think it's probably my most worn thing that I made this year. I guess part of that might be that I did finish it early in the year, so I had, you know, the end of last winter and early spring, and this, the beginning of this current winter and fall to wear this in as well. So I definitely recommend the Ranunculus. If you're like Ranunculus curious, but you don't really think it's your style, I would recommend looking at some of the project pages, because people have done a lot of different things with it that kind of make it, I would say, like more appropriate for people with varying styles, and might inspire you to, you know, try out some of your own mods that might make it more what you're looking for. And it's a very easy to follow pattern. Plus, I think it fits pretty well with, you know, the circular yoke followed by some raglan increases. I think that helps offset some of the fit issues I find with a circular yoke. So definitely a pattern to check out. Not that you need me to tell you that, because countless people have probably already said that to you, or it's just appeared on the internet enough that you already have this on your radar if it's something you want to make. But in any case, definitely love this one. Now, however, we are entering the territory of some of my more ill-fated makes of 2023. All my fault. Next, I started the My Time sweater, and this is made out of Scopius terrazzo in the colorway Fontana, which is a merino viscose DK yarn that has these tweedy flecks, and Valley Yarn Southampton, which is a silk mohair. I used 880 yards of the terrazzo and 920 yards of the mohair approximately, although I believe that was before I remade the sleeves. So this sweater is something that I'd had on my radar for quite a while. I really loved the look of it. I really liked the sleeves. When I knit it, I did actually have a little bit of a problem. When I blocked it, the sleeves were like covering my entire hand. They were so long, and because the sleeves have this dramatic drop stitch effect, I had to go back and frog the whole sleeve, well, both sleeves, and re-knit them. And so that kind of ended up being a long process. I blocked it and the sleeves didn't fit and it sat for a while. Then I frogged the sleeves and I re-knit them and it sat for a while. Then I blocked it and it sat for a while. And then I finally sewed in the ends. So I started this February 12th, and I didn't finish it until December 7th, when I finally sewed in the ends as part of my, I believe, my knitting chores video. I made the size 2, which is probably a little bit less ease than is recommended, although I think my sweater did block out a bit. I am happy with this. I haven't had as much opportunity to wear it as I think I was kind of expecting, just because it took me so long to finish, but I'm looking forward to reaching for this this year and seeing, you know, how it works out for me to style it. Next is another Lily Kate France pattern. This is the Be Thankful cardigan. This one also had some problems. All these problems are of my own creation. This one more than the other even. I've talked a lot about this. This is a cardigan. I think I made this size 2, which is a little bit less ease again than I probably should have picked. I have a 37-inch bust. I don't recall, but this has a lot of ease built in. I used Knit Picks Wool of the Andes tweed in Welly's Heather, and I used 974 yards or 443 grams of it. And I did mod the sleeves to have a bit more decreasing happening throughout. It's a very dramatic balloon. I mean, even still, but in the pattern, essentially you're like doing no decreases until you get to a certain point, then you're doing them pretty dramatically at the end. And I just did a light taper for mine. I started this February 26th. I didn't finish it until December 11th. This one I like lost yarn chicken. I ordered more yarn. I shipped it to the wrong address. It took forever to show up. I ordered more yarn. So now I have extra. In the meantime, I forgot what needle size I used to knit the first sleeve. So I kind of put off knitting the second sleeve for a while and just kind of had to guess. And it's close enough. It looks fine now. This was another thing that I finished up or began to finish up for my knitting chores video. I think I blocked this for that, and I've since sewn on the buttons, and yeah, it looks great. I'm really happy with it. It's super cozy. I've worn it a couple times, and I look forward to having this for the rest of the winter and fall and a long time to come. Next up is the garment that I'm wearing. Am I wearing this the right direction? So it turns out I've been wearing this, I think, the wrong way the whole time, but the next up is what I'm wearing, and this is the Shimmer Slipover. I guess I'll just take it off for now, by Apella Knits. I made this for, I think, the Brook Willow Knit like vest make along, and I used my remaining Woolyknit British Wool 4-ply for this, held double with a strand also. So 2 strands of Woolyknit and 1 strand of Knit Picks Aloft in the color Labyrinth. This is a bottom-up vest. I really loved the kind of dramatic armholes and this, it's hard to show, but this like ribbed detail that runs from the bottom up through and along the sleeves. That really was something that I liked about it. And it was pretty difficult to knit, I would say, compared to, I mean, if it was top down. I just find that part of bottom up knitting where you're managing a bunch of different pieces like a little bit harder than it is with top down, because with top down you're like creating the different pieces as you go along and then joining them. And here you're like separating a bunch of pieces that have already been knit together for a while, and you're just holding a lot of stitches for what feels like a lot longer. So that was kind of difficult, but I do really like the finished product. I think it's very nice. I love the way that these yarns look together. They look like they were like made to go together. If you compare it to my other woolly knit piece, definitely much less like heathering. This one leans more blue because of the mohair, which is kind of fun. But yeah, this is something that I enjoy the look of. Because of my fear of bleeding with this yarn and like color transfer, I haven't found myself wearing it as much as I might otherwise. Honestly, I don't wear white that much, like plain white shirts. I think that's probably what I would wear with this if I was feeling a little bit braver. But with white, I'm worried about like spilling on myself anyway. And then to also worry about color transfer from, you know, slip over, that's something that concerns me. And so I've more been sticking to wearing it with darker garments, and I just don't necessarily reach for it as much as I would like. So I think incorporating this into my wardrobe is something that I'd like to work on this year. And I did knit this between March 6th and April. I made the 3rd size, and I used 1,023 yards or 199 grams of the British wool and 478 yards of the Aloft. I used up almost all of the rest of my British wool this way. I think I have like 5 grams left, so definitely a success. And while I'm trying not to buy yarn now for a while, I would really like to get some more woolly knit in the future, because it was really nice how far these British wool cones went. Moving on, my next cast on was my slash dot cowl, which is a pattern by Sarah Hood. I made this in Mirasol Wiklla, which is a 50% alpaca, 50% cotton bulky weight yarn that's been discontinued. I initially, many years ago, bought the single skein of garnet, which is this pink color. And I only had, like, I didn't know what to do with the single skein. So I ended up deciding that I would maybe make a cowl, and I would buy a second skein of yarn, which is where the calcite came in, and that's this gray. And this is a free pattern. It was very nice. I did mod it to include ribbing instead of a curled end, which is what the pattern calls for. I think it has you knit a couple rounds in your main color. I used 31 grams of the pink and 62 grams of the yellow, and I don't know what to do with the rest of this yarn. And I will say, like, I'm kind of disappointed, speaking of bleeding, I guess, that this yarn bled quite a bit. I think you can kind of see it here. Like, it just didn't hold its color very well. I think it kind of ends up looking a little bit messier, although I think it looks better in person than it's picking up on camera. So I don't know if I want to use these yarns together. I would probably use a color catcher and or some vinegar. Overall, okay way to use a yarn that maybe I should have just destashed, but it's not the pattern's fault. It's the bleeding and my yarn choice and everything. I kind of wish I'd bought enough of this yarn to make like a sweater or something just off the bat. But I bought it when I was newer to knitting again and newer to using like nice yarns. So I didn't really think about what I was going to do with a yarn. I didn't think that far. I just was like, oh, a single skein sounds fine. And then, you know, it kind of wasn't. But it's okay. I wear it sometimes. It's pretty warm. The yarn's really soft, so it's fine. And this I knit between March 10th and March 31st. Next up, my favorite and maybe most frustrating knit of the year is my Lakes pullover. And I started this April 4th and finished it in May. This is a pattern by Ozetta. It's written for worsted weight yarn. And I used Knit Picks Upcycle Reserve 100% wool worsted in the color Amarillo, and that is one of their limited time yarns that I believe was made from mill ends, which might be part of my problem. It's pretty soft, but I don't think the twist was very tight or that the yarn was like held together super well. So I used 917 yards of this, and I have already made a sweater, a cardigan out of this yarn. So I had quite a bit. It was on like super duper sale. And I really enjoyed knitting this pattern. It was my first time doing a saddle shoulder, my first time doing sleeve shaping for a shoulder. So there's some short rows at the like sleeve cap, and those were really fun. This yarn is really pilly though. So I've pilled this many times. Part of me wonders if like by de-pilling this, I'm like inviting more pills, if I need to do it harder or softer. Like I really don't know, because I de-pill it, I just keep doing it and keep doing it, and maybe I'm like inviting the yarn to pill more by doing it. I don't know. If you have any like super pilly sweater recommendations, let me know. I mean, I still wear this. It's still a really nice like throw over piece, but I think it would look more polished if it wasn't pilling so much. I wear it a lot. I wish that I could figure out how to make it stop. I have an electric depiller. I have a lot of different depilling methods I've tried, and none of them have really worked, and I just don't know what to do. So this is like a favorite, but also just kind of disappointing for how pilly it's ended up being. And I guess I just didn't wear the cardigan enough to notice. If I do have a little bit more of this yarn. Maybe if I'd made something that had more texture, it would have hidden the pills better as opposed to like plain stockinette. Maybe if I'd considered like a shawl or something instead, that would have been better. I think it's just made me a little bit more critical maybe of yarn choice, and that's, I guess, a good lesson always. The next thing I cast on was the Slip Snuggle Cowl. This is another pattern by Casey Herlihy. I knit it in discontinued yarn, the Cloudborn Highland DK yarn, which is a 100% non-superwash like Highland wool yarn. I had it in these 3 colors, and I bought 1 skein of each. And the skeins were each 50 grams, so I didn't really know what to do with it. And I ended up coming upon this cowl. I think I'd had it in my library for a while because Casey has like she has deals when you buy multiple patterns. And I really wanted something easy. I cast this on in May, around the time I was finishing my PhD, and also just before I went to Boston. And I wanted something that would be easy and mindless to knit, and that I could also pick up later without worrying about like what part of a pattern I was in. So I actually let this hibernate for a while after that, and I finished it in October when Casey started her knit along for the fall. So that was kind of a nice kick in the pants to get this going again. I really love these colors together. I think this is a win for me in the color department. And I used 15 grams of each of the pinks and 26 grams of the gray. So I still have a good amount left, and I'm not certain what I'll do with it. I might try to incorporate it as like a contrast color in a larger sweater. I don't know, but the slip stitch texture of this and the color work makes it very squishy. It's super nice, and this is something that I have really enjoyed wearing in these colder months. My next finished object is the Lotus Petal top by Iris of Iris Makes. This is a fingering weight summer tee. It's knit bottom up, and it has this little detail along the bottom hem. This one is a little pilly, although I don't think I've tried to de-pill it at all. I knit this in Knit Picks Gloss Fingering, which is a 70% merino, 30% silk yarn. I use the colorway Velveteen for this, and I used 140 grams or 660 yards. So that was almost 3 whole skeins to make, I actually don't know what size I made, but probably a 2 or 3. This was for a summer top knit along that Iris ran, and I started this on May 4th and finished it later in May, so I knit this pretty quickly. I did end up bringing this on my trip to Boston and wearing it quite a bit then, and I wore it quite a bit in the weeks after that as well. I'm actually going to be knitting another summer top for Iris. Just received notification that I'm in this test, and I will be knitting that. I think the test is due like April, March, May, somewhere a good bit later. I really appreciate that she has these long tests. And during Knit Picks sale, I ordered more gloss fingering, so I'll be knitting that in a different color of this yarn. And yeah, I really like Iris's patterns. She's another neuroscientist knitter. Always nice to know the people who have been doing that academia thing and knitting as well. There's quite a few of us. And yeah, this is bottom up, but I didn't find it too difficult. The sleeves are just ribbing that you pick up, and it looks really nice. I enjoyed this one, and I'm excited to knit that next summer top that is still unnamed by Iris. After that, I knit my next summer tee, which is the Quill tee. This is a circular yoke colorwork sweater in fingering weight yarn. I knit it in the Yarn Collective Fleurville 4-ply in the color Hibiscus, which is a 100% wool merino wool yarn. I used 180 grams, which was 688 yards. And I think that this yarn is a little bit on the thicker side for fingering weight, so under 400 yards per 100 grams. For my contrast color, I used some Pear Stroll that I had on hand. That's a Knit Picks sock yarn, and I think I used about 20 grams of it. So this is a beautiful top. It has a beautiful yoke. The color work was very easy to do. The chart was easy to follow, and I find it fits pretty well. I do sometimes have fit issues with circular yokes, but I found this one to fit super nicely. I started knitting this on August 29th, and I finished it in September. I think in the time between finishing my Lotus Petal and starting this, I was knitting some gifts, and I kind of had fallen off knitting. I was sort of deep in like job hunt, to think about my career mode, and I'd also gotten COVID in Boston, and even after I came back, I ended up having to frog my Botanic Shawl. I just didn't really have anything that I was like excited to work on that was already on my needles, and I think that kind of held me back a little bit. So it took a while to come back around to knitting. I think I had some gift things going on in that time, but nothing for me, and this kind of revitalized my enjoyment of knitting and reminded me that like, oh yeah, I do like doing that. So I'm down to my last like 5-ish items. Next up is my Lodestar. This is a pattern by Kirsten Rivetta from the summer 2021 issue of Pom Pom. This is something that I was knitting, I've talked about this pattern, this yarn combo quite a bit. I made this in Valley Yarns Northampton, which is a DK weight merino alpaca silk blend. And I used 868 yards or 350 grams. So that was 7 50-gram balls, and I think I used the tiniest bit of the 1/8 for just finishing up the bind off at the bottom. So this is a pattern I'd long wanted to make. I started it in September on the 19th, and I finished it in December. At that point, it was a little bit late to wear this. I think this will be more of like a later winter spring top for me here in the Bay Area. And I did have a little bit of yoke trouble, which I discussed. I think this was my first like kind of intense lace yoke, and I struggled a little to like figure out how to make it work. I think this was my first time knitting a garment from a like mag or book pattern, and they are a little bit sparser than when you can just print your own PDF that can be as long as you want. So that might have contributed a little bit to my confusion, but I was able to figure it out, and after a couple times doing the yoke, I got it right. And I do really love this. I think it fits really well. It looks very nice. I'm excited to have this as something that I can wear in the slightly warmer months than we've got now, but I anticipate that this will be something that I am reaching for a good amount later this year. My next make was my classic ribbed hat by Jake Canton for Pearl Soho. That's a free pattern written for DK weight yarn, and I used more of a worsted weight. So I used Good Vibrations mohair merino yarn that is from a farm in North Carolina that I got at Asheville at Pearl's Yarn Emporium. And it's I think mine was like 65% mohair, 65% merino, 35% mohair or something. I don't have the ball band on me, nor do I have the hat. The colorway I got was called Flowing, and it was really fun, kind of self-striping-esque colorway that I just thought was so pretty, and the yarn was so soft. I just was really excited to pick something up that was so unique and from the area. But I wasn't sure what to do with it for a while, and this hat ended up kind of being an impulse cast on. I just found myself wanting to do something with that. I've been drawn more to my single like special skeins that I've gotten traveling, and that one just called out to me. I didn't really want to make a cowl out of it, like, or anything super lacy. I wasn't sure what to do with it because it did have a pretty bold color palette and like lots of color changes. High contrast color palette, I guess, within the yarn. So like lace, cables, nothing like that was really something that I wanted to do. And when I came across the idea of a hat, it's a little bit overkill for here in the Bay Area, like a puffy mohair merino hat, but it worked out very well, and I think it's going to be good for traveling and good for some of the colder times here, for sure. So I ended up using 96 grams of that. That included the pom-pom that I made, and I'm super happy with it. I made it between October 9th and the beginning of November. It's been nice to have. I actually did end up wearing it a couple times out and about here, even if it's a little bit more intense of a hat than perhaps I need. It's just nice. It's really nice. The next thing I made probably is something I don't have a start or end date for on Ravelry. This is my Sunday morning wrap by Lisa DeFruscia for SW Co. This is a trapezoidal wrap pattern, and it's very simple. It's a free pattern, and it just has these blocks of twisted rib followed by blocks of stockinette. I did end up having to cut my final twisted rib portion. You're supposed to make it extra long down here. I ended up cutting it a little bit short. I ran out of yarn. So I had 4 200-ish yard hanks of this yarn, and this is a super kind of niche local yarn from Alabama. This is from Bucksnort Alpaca Ranch. So it's 100% alpaca. The colorway is called Shooter, and as far as I can tell, Shooter is the alpaca that this yarn came from. And I got this at Sparkle Studio in Huntsville. Now, I initially had a different plan for this yarn. I had a different pattern on my Make 9 that this yarn was going to be in, but I decided ultimately, you know, like reading up more about alpaca and thinking about it more, that like it probably wasn't super appropriate for a garment. So I ultimately decided to knit a wrap instead, and I looked around quite a bit for one that I thought would work for an alpaca yarn and kind of have the vibes that I wanted, that wasn't too complicated, that was only one color, because I wanted to be able to use this yarn and have it like shine on its own. And I think that this pattern accomplished that really well. Sunday Morning, I believe, was a yarn that SW Co offered. I think it is since discontinued, but they do have, I think, like a different shawl pattern that has some of the same motifs as this, and maybe some other Sunday Morning yarn patterns that are very nice. This was a very meditative, easy knit, something that was kind of nice to just have on my needles and work over the course of a few weeks in between working on, you know, different things like my Lodestar and some of the other shawls and the hat and, you know, everything like that. So this was definitely a good knit, and I'm happy that I was able to use this yarn within a year of buying it. Actually, I bought it in December of 2022, and I finished this probably in November is my guess. So now we're down to our last 2 pieces. These were both patterns by Casey Herlihy, and I knit them for her knit along. First up is the Lost Horse. This is a single skein triangular shawl pattern, and I knit it in Ancient Arts Fiber Little Nettle Soft, which is a superwash merino nettle yarn, which is fun. I got this at Fiber Artwork in Huntsville in December of 2021, one. This colorway is called Orange Tiger Tabby. This is a slightly thicker fingering weight yarn. It's under 400 yards per 100 grams. I worked on this from October 15th to November 15th for the knit along, and I think at the end you're supposed to do a couple rows of like maybe plain stockinette perhaps. I did not have enough yarn for that. I just had to bind off and call it a day. I might have even had to do one fewer repeat. Mine is a little bit smaller, but it's really nice. I do find myself wearing it a good amount, although I need to work on how to, I might need like a shawl pin or something. I've been tying it, but it's still like in a couple stores has like come off my neck. I don't know if it's just because like it's superwash merino and it's kind of and it's kind of slippy, but that's something, I don't want to lose it. So yeah, this is a really nice one, and I haven't had it finished very long, only just under 2 months now. I think it was fun. It was fun to kind of do these like eyelets around centered decreases, and you know, it was a very easy pattern to kind of memorize and just have ready in your head to go, so you could work it up without too much trouble. Last but not least is my faceted cowl. So this is a cowl written by Casey. Also, I used Earl Grey Fiber Company Darjeeling sock yarn in the color Moth Wings. That is a 75/25 sock yarn. I believe this dyer has unfortunately stopped dyeing, at least on a large scale, which is too bad because I really loved her colors. I think she had like an exclusive base with my local yarn store, Black Squirrel Berkeley. I got this there for sale actually a while back, and this cowl pattern calls for fingering weight yarn held double, which I did do here. And I think this was a really great way to show off this yarn that I've been kind of trying to figure out what to do with for a while. I think it actually technically goes this way. I think it looks really nice. The gauge is kind of tight. It's 23 stitches per 4 inches, I believe, for like a DK-esque weight. So having that, and having, again, like with the slip snuggle cowl, the like slip stitch motif kind of creates this like very cushy fabric that has been really nice and warm. I finished this November 30th, and I started it sometime in November, I believe after I finished The Lost Horse. So I knit this in a couple weeks and finished it just in time for the deadline of her knit along. And that was the last thing I finished in 2023, at least for me. In the remaining month, I did a lot of gift knitting, and I also started my Shifty by Andrea Mowry, which is something that I'm carrying over into this coming year. I guess I'll show you the progress on that. Here's my Shifty. My yarn is a mess. I've only done like a couple of the yoke increases, which aren't like, they don't come too fast. And I have a decent amount of this to go. So this is kind of the last thing I worked on that was taking up a decent amount of time and was for me, but did not get finished. Like I said at the beginning, I did have a make 9 for 2023. I'll kind of go through and talk about what was on that list and whether or not I finished it. And you know, you'll know whether I finished it because I've talked about the things I finished. So first up was my textbook cowl, which I did finish, my Botanic Shawl, which I also finished, and the Viva Cami by Ksenia Naidion. Apologies for potential mispronunciations there. That is a cami pattern, and I've been moving away from cami patterns, I would say, this year. I like them. I think they look beautiful, but I don't necessarily find that more like strappy camis or cropped camis or whatever are really fitting my style or my wardrobe. So that is a pattern I decided against making and won't be carrying into this current year. Next was the Quill tee, which I made. And after that was the Nevermore blouse by Kadri. So that was a pattern for a like V-neck sweater, I guess, with a lace detail. And my plan was to use the Bucksnort Alpaca Ranch yarn for it that I ended up using for my Sunday morning wrap. Next was my Ranunculus, which I finished, my My Time sweater, which I finished, and my Shifty, which is in progress. And the final pattern was the September sweater by Petite Knit. And for that, I wanted to use a Knit Picks Simply Wool Worsted yarn. I have some right here. It's Knit Picks Simply Wool Worsted Twist. I believe they've discontinued this, maybe this particular colorway, and definitely this like naming of the yarn. It kind of has this barber poling, but there are twist versions of the yarn still available under just the name Simply Wool Worsted. So this is another thing that I will be carrying into this year as a project that I want to make. So overall, that means I did 5 of the projects as intended. One of them I used the yarn in a different way, and my main goal with this Make 9 was to use the yarn, so we can call that good enough. And one of them was a whip. And then 2 of them I didn't cast on at all, one of which I do not plan to cast on at this time, and one that I will be hopefully knitting in the first couple months of 2024. Definitely look out for my Shifty making more progress and my September sweater coming onto the scene as a new whip in the near future. I actually just wound the cakes up from the Simply Wool Worsted a couple days ago, so I think I'll be swatching for that one soon. But even though, you know, I guess I did like 5.5 of the patterns completely, if we're counting the shawl as a half, I think I did a great job. I'm proud of it, my work. I think, you know, I want to balance having my goals and meeting those goals and actually enjoying the things that I'm knitting. So I don't want to penalize myself in some way for not like doing everything that I said I would do a year ago. That's just not really my style, and I don't even know what that sort of penalty would look like. So that's all that I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my 2023 projects. I'd love to hear what you were knitting this year. Do you have any favorites? Do you have anything that you're looking forward to knitting in 2024? Just hit me up down below in the comments. I'd love to chat. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. I make new videos at least every week, and in the next few days I should have a 2024 goals and Make 9 video releasing. That should be fun. If you want to get notified when that'll come out, go ahead and click that bell and you'll receive notifications every time I release a new video. Thanks so much for joining me today. Happy New Year again, and I'll see you soon. Bye.